Welcome everybody to the second round of MDC sessions today. With today being a full day of sessions, if you happen to need to step away for a moment or longer, don't worry about it. Don't worry about missing a presentation. All of today's sessions are being recorded, so you'll be able to view the entire session or portions that you missed later on the conf tuner. Please remember that we'll be doing if you'll be doing any live tweeting on Twitter during the conference, be sure to use the hashtag MNDevConf and or the handle MNDevCon. Feel free to DM us too at our Twitter account. If you have any comments or concerns that you would like us to be aware of privately, we'd love to hear from you. And as a reminder, at the end of the day, there will be an after party at 5 o'clock. That's 5 o'clock Central, where you'll be get the opportunity to win some prizes. So you will want to be sure to stick around for that. And we're going to be listening to the session of The Too Many Faces of Architecture by Mihaela-Roxana Ghidersa. She is a software developer and is very technology passionate. She enjoys building and delivering quality, all the while trying to have as much fun as possible, aren't we all? She is a perceptive and innovative individual that's not afraid to exploit its best version and go the extra mile outside the comfort zone of convention. This exact desire of getting out of the comfort zone led her in the last years to changing the context from full stack, front-end API design to technical leadership and architecture. And now our speaker, Mihaela-Roxana.
Hello, let me share my screen right away. So hello, and let me know that I'm very happy to have you with me today. My name is Mihaela Ghidersa. I'm a software developer at Centric Romania, and besides my deep interest in software and technology in general, I like to research and prepare content that I gather sometimes from my experiences, sometimes from the ones near me, for cool events like this one today. So I really want to thank the organizers for having me. I feel honored to be part of such an amazing lineup of speakers, and also to get the chance to do what I like. When I'm not speaking or coding whatsoever, I am passionate about, outdoor activities and sports, reading, blogging, just your typical developer. First of all, I gotta say that this time I'm not here to turn your world upside down with technical concepts or give you perspective on what the best architecture for you it might be. I think this is sometimes a toxic trait that we have, thinking that is always about the technical knowledge. Well, not so much this time. When we discuss this sort of decisional impact, we need to dig beyond. We need to challenge our beliefs about team dynamics and roles. We have to just quit being so emotionally attached to our rules, positioning levels, never-ending processes. Stop, stare at the team, and use the expertise and the knowledge to picture and actually shape by taking into consideration the current context. I'm not an architect yet, but my experiences showed me some successful ingredients that can make things move around when we might get stuck, and they actually really work in some contexts. So this is what I want to talk about today, my perspective, the perspective of the team, we could say in this case. Also, I'm extremely interested in knowing your perspective, and beyond delivering a presentation today, I'm here to actually contribute to creating better teams and better products, why not? When it comes to clearly defining what software architecture is, I find it very hard to actually say it very clear because there are a lot of interpretations. A lot of them are confusing, hard to tackle actually. So most of them seem pretty abstract and ambiguous for a software developer, especially one in the early years of the career that is building. Always hearing the term architecture made me think about, just taking a balance and seeing what is happening when we are talking about building architecture. So I took a sneak peek in that area. And if you are like me, you can't resist the curiosity to actually see how they can share maybe some concepts and what we can learn from that. So there is this beautiful and very artistic definition that the architecture are technical solutions that make artistic, in our case, abstract concepts materialize. From my experience, the simplest way to think about software architecture, no matter the level of experience or expertise, is this one. Software architecture is a set of characteristics combining both technical and business requirements. Even if we're talking of project or organization level, it doesn't matter that much because they should actually combine very well or be similar. But with this, I will be able to define a structure that will help me build a performant, secure, and flexible system. So basically, architecture is a base structure upon which we build step by step, one component after another, creating relationships between components, seeing what the role of each is. Consider that all of this is being realized while taking into consideration the whole picture of the application that you are thinking about building. When talking about architecture, we also have to draw some very important lines between types. Because we have multiple types, so it's important to actually understand what is happening with which. Probably there are so many more than the ones that we have listed in here. But I think that for today's discussion, a little dive into these types is more than enough. First of all, it's important to understand that each of them will need some different characteristics. Yes, some different maybe pieces of knowledge. But what is common? It's having years of experience. It's nice being smart. It's nice being born a leader. But the expertise and the experience is being built by going out there and trying and failing and learning from real-life experiences. We have to experiment with different technologies in order to be able to make some decisions. So let's start and talk a bit of each of them. When we say application architecture, we say looking inside the application and understanding how it is built and why is it built like that. We think about the composition of components, understanding the value of some patterns that we are using, of the patterns that we have behind the frameworks and the libraries that we are using, how the code is organized, and things like this. Going a bit further to the system architecture, we refer to those software systems that are actually composed of multiple applications and that are using maybe more than one technology. Consider an end-to-end software at a very high level. The flows, how all the levels communicate, how they integrate, how they work together. This is what it is when we are thinking about system architecture. So basically, having into mind that the application architecture tends to focus primarily on software, well, system architecture is about understanding both software and the hardware. And so nice we came to software architecture, which is some sort of combination between application and system architecture. It's all about concepts that relate to design of a software system. And it's about the structure of the code, understanding how the whole system works, somewhere in the high level, but also thinking about inner workings and maybe going beyond to deployment. Enterprise architecture, well, this is more, let's say, at a more high level, because it requires a high level of abstraction. It's about strategy, more about strategy than about code. And last but not last, it's the solution architecture, which actually takes care of designing, describing, and managing the solution engineering in relationship with some business requirements. So we are talking more about business problems that we have to work with. Going beyond, with all these types of architecture, if the fundamentals of each and what makes each of them and what makes them different is not clear, it's easy to become confused and maybe at time to come to a point where we can't really distinguish architecture from design. Again, I think disappears because we have this tendency of giving these abstract definitions that we are talking before. So the architecture is a blueprint defining the high-level units of our systems, the way they interact, the way they work, the way they evolve together and in relationship with one another. Choosing the right or the wrong architectural pattern will determine just how scalable, performant, how reliable, how secure our system will be. On the other hand, a system design shapes things more at code level. For example, the way components work and interact. Having a strong system design helps the development team in order to become more efficient and in organizing in terms of understanding what are the responsibilities of some functions, some classes, some modules. So yeah, we are talking about this part of more focused on code. By defining the systems design, we can later decide what design patterns we should use in certain contexts, depending on how the application is going to flow. And since we're talking about this, and we were also talking about making a parallel with the buildings architecture. Well, I really like this one. This definition that good design is as little design as possible. Well, when we are talking about design, less is always better because it concentrates on the essential aspects and the products are no longer full of details that are not that essential. On the other side, extending a bit the discussion about design and architecture, just to be sure that we are on the same page, Grady Bock nicely talks about how architecture represents the significant design decision that shape a system where significance is measured by the cost of change. And we are going to talk a bit later about change and about decisions when we are talking about changes. But simply put, software architecture is focused on the entire system, while software design focuses on a more specific level, even though it's component, module, and so on. And I really liked this, the way Simon Brown put this. He was saying something like, architectural decisions are the ones that you cannot reverse without a high degree of effort. You can't change an architectural decision in an afternoon. And precisely because we can change an architecture decision in an afternoon, the first step in architecture software is about understanding what is significant and why is that significant. As how you're going to solve a difficult security or performance issue is more important, and maybe not more important, but it has a higher priority than a specific name of a constant that you're going to use in the code or something related to the database. I don't know, the length of a column or something like that. So let's just stop for a second and give an eye on this. It's easy to think that if you are writing good code and following some approaches that pass the test of time, it's not important to keep an eye on architecture. As in, I'm a developer, I don't have to think about that. Let's just let the architect think about those issues. Well, there are some benefits for getting the bigger picture, from understanding how components in the system should interact, to which should have what responsibility, to the cost of what I'm doing, to the cost of the changes that I'm doing in the code. So from the list of benefits, maybe one of the most important is the ability to predict change. So I think maybe we are all aware of and familiar with Darwin's theory that says that the species that survives the most is not the strongest, but the one that adapts better to change. Well, I really think that if Darwin would have worked in software development, he would have stated something like this: the system that survives longer is not the strongest, but the one that has an architect that is actually able to adapt and predict the changes. So the best solution is to build an architecture that anticipates change and evolution. How does it do that? Well, we have to think about cost. It has to be in a cost-efficient way. And we cannot really ignore all the things that actually are going to improve what we are building. Regarding to this part of actually thinking in terms of evolving our architecture, or how it's going to evolve in time, Neil Ford, together with other great authors, named the idea the evolutionary architecture. So following this mindset, you are able to quickly adapt to change without the need to predict or make uncertain commitments. So I really encourage you to just look into this in details if you are interested on the approach. So often we encounter this idea that, you know, development team should get their attention on the coding and don't bother with architectural concepts, since those are not in their, you know, job description. And I came to see in the last years that this is such a wrong way to look at things, because there are so many benefits to having a look from above at what you're working. It's so insightful and it helps you so much into thinking the work that you are going to do. And I will again give my perspective. In the moment that I stepped a bit away from the IDE, because some things were just not making any sense, and I really tried to understand what is happening in the project at a higher level. Well, when I started researching on that, that's exactly when I started to understand better what I was building and actually coming with better solutions of the problems that we're having, instead of complaining about the same problems that I wasn't able to understand before. So working towards consistency and both seeing exactly some technical matters that I was not aware and seeking some guidance, it helped me a lot. So yeah, you might need to research a bit. You might need to talk to people, which maybe is not something that technical people like so much. But it's important that in the end, to become able to visualize component interactions from a higher level, to change the perspective, and not only on the code, but on the way we are doing our work as developers in the team. And we are able to actually change perspective a bit and see exactly what is happening, what we're about to build, how the decision that we are doing, that we're having at code level, are going to impact at a higher level. And by doing this mindset, and by switching the context a bit, I was able to quit some of the myths I've grown to believe in, you know, such as software architecture is inflexible and forever. No, the architecture is an architect's problem. Well, not so much, and we are going to talk about this. And architecture is not about coding. Oh, let me tell you, it is about coding. Let's just dive into them. But before diving actually into let's say each and every single one, I would really like to approach the second one with an architecture is an architect's issue, and we don't have to deal with that. And I really get this feeling that we don't understand exactly what an architect is and how his role is actually being built. So independently of what we're about to discuss, or how often the role of an architect is pretty hard to define, I really think that just a promotion is not enough. So there is this strong need for evolving gradually, of having experiences, just as we were talking in the beginning, going out there and failing a bit and working towards that expertise and build an attitude that actually makes us very good architects in the team, and an architect in the real sense of the word, not just, you know, a role. At the same time, I feel that there has been an evolution within this role from a traditional to a more hipster-like approach. So we are going to put in balance why we should implement certain approaches over others. So let's see a bit. The first one, it's that, okay, an architect, it's a title. For the longest time, the idea was that the architect, the one that once arises from between developers, will forever just stay in his comfortable, posture, not touching anything anymore, only, giving directions and being creative. Now, excuse the irony, but as a junior and in my first project ever in the beginning of my career, I did not even got the honor to meet the architect. And I worked for that project for like 1.5 years. So yeah, you can imagine that when I switched teams later and the architect had the desk closer to mine, and I understood the difference, and I actually saw how we were interacting with it, and he was so present in the team, I really understood the difference between a title and a role. Because the architect is not only being built by a person, the architecture is not only being built by a person. We need to get away from the mindset that the architect architects the architecture. I'm not saying that teams shouldn't have somebody that, okay, clearly has the role, who the architecture in the team is. But at some point in the evolution of the application, any team member can come with ideas and insights. And that really can impact the current state of the architecture, especially because sometimes developers have another perspective and they come with a more real perspective. So this is what I mean by having a flexible role. It's about collaboration, especially when we are talking about something that is so impactful as architecture. And of course, again, we used to think that the architect is the one and only that owns the full stack. And I was thinking like, oh my God, you mean like every technology, like every detail? That is preposterous. It's unrealistic to expect that from a single person, considering precisely the speed with which the technology stack evolved in the last decade. This means an enormous pressure on the architect. In the end, who would ever be good enough or want the role if we think like this? So a more realistic approach is to actually use the technical expertise of the team while growing the team. Taking part in the development process, either by pair programming, some actual coding, or maybe some time-to-time code reviews, gives you an idea about whether or not your architectural perspectives are grounded in reality. The sooner you have this kind of feedback, as a developer's perspective, or some feedback from how hard or easy it's to implement a certain approach, the easier it is to actually see what the pains of the applications are, or what is the pain of working in certain areas and trying to work with that part and manage maybe and do some changes in the architecture plan in order to be as grounded in reality as possible. Besides this, so leaving apart the technical matters, being an actual part of the team will build a better collaboration and actually trust in the team, because your team will understand what exactly you are building, what is the, the vision, and what exactly we are expecting from the application. So everyone in the team has a perspective and a piece of knowledge that might be missing in the decision process. So we have to be very careful and consider the team. We don't have to be the god of the whole stack, the whole technology stack. We just have to collaborate with the others and try to see exactly what their perspective is and build on that. So why ignore this approach if we can do it like this and we can gain so much from it? Then we have, okay, the architect before was defining and he was strongly taking care of the architecture. And again, I was thinking like, what is this architecture police? So the architecture is something so fixed and hard to implement that needs boarding? I don't think so. Well, definitely not. It's about understanding the system and having the developer's perspective. So as we are talking about, understanding the system goes both ways. One goes from an architect to understand the reality of the project, of the application that he is building. On the other side, it comes with the need for the team to actually understand what they are building. And by collaborating, we have, definitely a better view on the reality of the application and in the end, we come to building a better product. So now that we finished the discussion about what exactly is the architect, and maybe we are on the same page more or less, we will see in the end, we can consider some myths and we can invalidate those and actually talk some details that we've seen maybe behind the architect role through some different lenses. So we have two concepts that I want to talk today: leadership over management and expertise over knowing everything. I think that these are some characteristics that we have to take into consideration when we are talking about architecture and the architect's role. And as I was saying in the beginning, I really believe in building the right processes and building the right attitude in order to create a team dynamic that it's helping the application, the project that we're working on, grow. So there's a difference between management and leadership. Management is about doing stuff, the day-to-day operations needed in order to get things done. Leadership, on the other hand, is about people. It's less about what you're doing and more about who you're actually being, because you have a role in there that puts you as a role model for others. They are looking at you and they're expecting for validation, having into consideration that you seem the most, maybe experienced or taking the most important decisions. So it's important to show up for people, to collaborate with the people in your team. And it's just a part of, human interaction. It's not rocket science. We just have to also think about this, not only about abstract concepts and technical concerns. So going from the part of leadership and management, it's important that, sometimes someone has a better overview, maybe a better experience in a certain area, and maybe insights in both, functional and non-functional requirements. And it has also, when you have this role, you have the responsibility to grow your team, the one that is standing around you and implementing what you are designing in the end. So an architect should understand that each member of the team comes with different levels of knowledge about architecture. So it's a very big responsibility, once again, to ensure the understanding of the architecture and sharing it in a very common language. Going beyond to the second concept that I wanted to discuss, it's related to some of the attitudes that we need to have. When we are, over and over chasing deadlines, trying to check some metrics and deliver, sometimes we forget that actually people are the ones that are doing the work, who make everything happening. So we don't usually talk about, about the soft side of a software architect. An architect's role is both worrying about the important technical decisions, but in the same time, as being part of the role, as a leader, as we discussed, is giving the team a direction, explain, be an influencer if you want. You have to collaborate, you have to coach everyone. So we are basically talking about a leadership role where not only technical skills are important, but also we talk about soft skills. The second concept that I wanted to discuss is expertise over know-it-all. Well, if you ask me, I really think that an architect should come from a software development background. I really think that this is important to have that base of development. You have to know and you have to understand what is happening in the code base. I don't really see how you can make the best decision if you don't have that inside. But here is where the misunderstanding is born. Many think that the architect has to also be the best developer in the team. Well, I would say that they might need the ability to, understand indeed some high-level concept, but you also have to understand the details. So you have to have this ability to automatically, and a very limited amount of time, to switch between details and architectural, big picture. So it's not about knowing it everything, but having an overview and the ability to actually switch in order to understand how everything is working. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not possible, because we are talking about one person and it's hard to know it everything. And that's why, again, we can go back to what we were talking before related to the collaboration and leaning on the team. As an architect, I really think that, you should own your best practices. You should understand the approaches that you are thinking about implementing, have an overview also on design, on the patterns, and what exactly brings value to your project in terms of technologies, if they work very good with the context of the project. When it comes to actually keeping an eye to details, to low-level code, I think the true value exists in using the technical expertise of the team. So being an architect is challenging and takes a lot of knowledge and experience. At the same time, you don't have to be an expert in any particular area of software development to become one, from my perspective. It is better to have a broad understanding of software development and being able to communicate your knowledge effectively while being backed up by best practices. I really find it important to know that you don't have to be the god of technology stack in order to become an architect. And again, I find it useful to have a broad perspective on software development, some emotional intelligence, leadership skills, and coaching. And more specific, I really find that there are some general set of skills that embody the architect role. So we are talking the pragmatic view, ability to identify areas of risk, ability to define, to design some software, overview on the delivery and the whole process, ownership when it comes to the whole process from the first line of code to actually to the way the deployment is done and what is happening with the product in the client side. So it's hard. And as business evolves over time, so does software as a consequence. So sooner or later, depending on the context and the domain that the application is being built on, we need to think that we have to build some tolerance in our system. And we have to think in terms of tolerance to change most of it. Observe exactly where and what kind of changes appear from one iteration to another. So you can do this gradually. You don't have to do it from the beginning and know it all. And this way, you can think about, okay, what kind of changes I might be expecting in the future, and we can prepare to meet them. Why so much analyzing? Where every time we assume a final decision, we are also saying no to some detail we might receive in time, detail that will help us make a more informed decision. So once you have committed to something, you already decided how the future block of time that you're going to put into that, because we're talking about estimations and everything. So exactly how block of time is going to be spent and how the product and the architecture will evolve. And I really like this concept from James Clear, because he says something like this: saying no saves you time in the future. Saying yes costs you time in the future. So he states that no is a form of time credit, while yes is a form of time debt. So invest very wise when it comes to the choices that you're going to do, especially when it comes to the evolution and the change. And yes, we come to the part of decision, because you're going to say, okay, but how are we going to do the most inspired decisions? And if they are so important, how are we ever going to be sure that what we are doing is okay? Well, making decision concerning architectural aspects, it's a very sensitive aspect, because those decisions have a huge impact. And one of the best practices in software development is to avoid making decisions until the very last moment, because especially in architecture, there is a high level of uncertainty. This makes the future hard to predict. When things are hard to predict, we tend to speculate. And this is something that we are aware and try to actually push the moment of making a decision to a limit in order to actually building the system with the most information that we can get, and with the capacity to be changed or extended in the future. So always try to get as much as possible and see exactly where you can take it in order to create a good strategy. So since we are mentioning a good strategy, well, in order to be prepared to make a commitment is to always gather feedback. And yeah, we are talking in this case when we are considering a system that it's already built. Yeah, there is a team that it's working on it. Always try to gather feedback from how things are working, what has been changed, what the evolution is, but don't get lost in details. And also try to accept that, yeah, maybe some of the past decisions were not the best, so you have to rethink some of them. Just accept that in order to actually find the best approach, you will have to fail in the beginning, and that is okay. So are maybe today's developers tomorrow's architects? Well, I really want to, if it's not obvious already, I want to start by pointing out that becoming a software architect is not something that you become out of nowhere. You've seen that it's a role that comes with a lot of responsibility, a lot of collaboration, so a lot of characteristics that you need to have. But the thing is, okay, if there are so many things to take into consideration, are we going just to stay in our places and do the things and let architects think about the architecture and coders, code? Well, not. As we already discussed, this is a myth that we just destroyed, because we have to collaborate, we have to interact and discuss our work. It's a switching, very flexible role. At some point, you can become, without knowing, a person that makes a decision or comes with a proposal about the architecture. So as an architect, you understand, and it's important to understand the context of the application, the components that are being used from a developer's perspective, and take more informed, realistic decisions. And yeah, in the same time, the team will understand the impact of their work and how important it is what they are doing, and they will trust more, both ways. Because in time, I think that and architects can maybe agree with me that in time you also see the perspective of the team and trust the team more, understanding how much it is helping. Then, architecture is for every developer, but not every developer will become an architect. The process of becoming an architect, from my perspective, is not a very well defined, with very precise steps. Maybe some of us are actually undertaking parts of the software architecture role. But always remember, there is a big difference between contributing to the architecture and actually being the one responsible for it. I don't think that just because, you are having a self-organizing team, you don't need an architect anymore, because having self-organizing teams, it's really hard. And even in the moment that you have, let's say, senior developers, it's actually pretty hard to make everything work. So an architect, it is needed. And as we've seen, there are a lot of responsibility, and yeah, it's a learning curve and an evolution curve. So not everyone in the end, if doesn't have discipline and work ethic and passion for software development, and not only, can become an architect. So if you're considering this, also consider taking maybe more challenges, and yeah, get some coaching, discuss with some people that already do it very well. From what we've discussed, maybe with some exception, architecture is a part of the development process, part that later is taken over and implemented by the team. Architecture is not about, forgetting about implementation details and getting drawn in abstractions, but about keeping them balanced. The real challenge, though, is knowing when to slightly move from one another. So it's important, and I'm going to give you a perspective on how I met this kind of experience. There was a time in my career where as I was saying, there were some things that I did not understood very well how were working in the application. And I really tried to cross that line of just being a developer to actually taking maybe some more leadership, technical and leadership combined roles. And I came to see that this is something that comes both from the team and also from the architect. But from the team perspective, because somehow today I want to encourage developers to take a better perspective on what is happening in the higher level of the application. Well, when I switched teams at some point, I saw that the developers were like, okay, this is our part. We don't really have to mess with what the architect is doing. We don't ever talk with the architect. So yeah, we are going to do just the day-to-day task and that's it. Well, in the moment that I came and challenged the team to actually, okay, let's talk with the architect, see exactly what is happening, understanding how we can improve some processes, give feedback on some decisions, everything changed. I saw an extreme evolution in my team, and it was amazing just how everything changed and how the discussions changed in the team were related to technical concerns. So you don't know where your next significant opportunity to learn and grow is going to come from. So you just have to experiment on the way. Although we discussed a lot about the best ways to do things, there are always, we always have this gap between the development team and the architect. And unless the effort to make things work goes both ways, it's going to be, pretty hard to have effort just from one side and actually make things work. So software development is a team activity, and in the end, even unintentional, we help each other grow. So think about this. So it's important to understand for the developers that architecture is not something that we cannot touch, and at the same time is not an easy road, but it's important to build the attitude and the technical skills in order to go to the career path that we want, or maybe just understanding the context of the application we're working on. So ask to be involved, ask for help. I never been refused when it comes to technical advice. I never been refused when I ask for something, help or guidance. So there is no reason to be afraid if you are determined. In the same time, for the architects, we already discussed a lot of concepts that you've seen that they have a lot of things to do. So it's important to be patient sometimes when, as a development team, we don't get all the details sometimes, or it's better to actually ask if something is not clear. So when it comes to building the right architecture for the right context, I came to learn that the hard way, and the most important concept is that the architecture stays as a part of the team. So if it's something for the architects today to that are watching this presentation that they can go with, it's actually make the team part of your work, and you will see a lot of changes. And on a more personal note, I was speaking before about some comparison that I did with architectural buildings. And I actually came in the discussion with a friend of mine that it's an architecture graduate. She mentioned this concept, which is transpositioning. And this concept states that by releasing ourselves from these disciplinary conventions, even if it is just for a short period of time, we can foster a great sense of possibility. We can free ourselves from our daily thinking and our patterns of thinking and build more empathy to the others involved in the process. So instead of fitting an individual in a group's philosophy, it's essential to benefit from each individual's background. And personally, in order to shape the dynamic of the group, it's good to actually create this kind of dynamic in the mindset also. So maybe we can think about this a bit and think that we are in the industry that it's continuously evolving, and in the same time we are so caught up in our ways. So sometimes we can actually look a bit to the right or to the left and see other approaches that maybe worked in other industries and learn from them. So I want to leave you with two thoughts. One for our developers. There is this concept called the generative resistance that sustains that good ideas do not come if everyone agrees about everything and have the same experiences. So I really encourage you to be open and confident, give feedback, talk about the challenges that you are having in your code, challenge your architect, collaborate with your technical leader or architect. And in the same time, ask, research, be curious, ask to be involved. On the other side, for our architects, just give it a try. Decide to create team dynamics when it comes to technical matters and decision that actually make the team have the feeling that, okay, this great idea was the result of the entire team, and actually creating that sense of trust and collaboration. Bet on shared thinking for great ideas, and combined with everything we've just discussed, you will witness a huge switch. You don't have to believe my word. You don't have to take it for granted. Just go there and try. And please let me know if and how it worked. Thank you. And let's say if someone wants to talk or we have some questions.
Thank you very much, Mihaela, for that. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Mihaela, I have a question. Do you find that there is, it's better for the team that a software architect come from a developer within the team, or is it okay to hire a software architect specifically for that role? What is going to be a better team dynamic, you think?
I've seen both approaches. I've seen a colleague that it was a developer, and then it just continuously, he grew into being a technical leader and then an architect. And maybe there is this sense of having someone that maybe it's easier in the beginning to work with someone that is part of the team and it has evolved in the team. On the other side, I also worked with architects that they were coming from outside the team, and they did a very good job, and they created team trust, and they collaborated so nice, and actually saved the project in a moment that it was in a very, well, not very, but let's say not so good, just to put it nicely. So I don't think that it's something that influences that much if we have the right attitude towards the team, because you can have someone that it used to be a part of the team, and then when it becomes a architect to just stay away from the team and just discuss abstractions, and someone that comes from outside that is very friendly and tries to make things work. So I don't think this is a characteristic that important. More important is to actually be to have the attitude of a leader and bring the team closer to the role, and also to the role as in technical matters, but also in when it comes to soft skills and collaboration and trust.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. I've got a question here. Is it better for architects to be dogmatic or pragmatic?
Well, in this period where everything in the technology stack, it's evolving so quickly, and yeah, there are technologies that live like 2 years and they seem awesome and just disappear, and also the team dynamic is changing so much with the new generations. I really think that it's important to be, first of all, open-minded and to understand all of this and having an overview. And when it comes to decisions, I think that you have to be pragmatic as an architect. This is my feeling, because there are a lot of, as we've discussed, there are a lot of decisions to make. There are a lot of changes that can appear in the context of the application. So you have to be very, or you have to have moments of being detached of the previous decisions that you had and that you, I don't know, maybe spend 6 months before taking and doing research. And just to understand that, okay, at the moment that wasn't a good decision, and be pragmatic and go with it, try to understand from it and evolve from that. So I really think that it's more about pragmatism.
Awesome. All right. I'll wait a second and see if there are any more questions. However, I do want to take the time to thank you very much, Mihaela. Again, I didn't say this earlier, but Mihaela is all the way in Romania. And it's pretty awesome that we can have her here at the Minnesota DevConf. I think it's awesome. I think we're good on questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Feel free to visit the other talks that have been recorded that are happening at this very time, or at the 9 o'clock hour, as well as the upcoming